Well, a very happy Monday after the 4th of July to you. It's Monday, July 6th, in case you've lost track, which a lot of us do in the summer. Welcome to Monday Musings in the Midwest. I'm your host, Barry Collins, a retired attorney, educator, leadership coach, and governance expert, although I hate to call myself an expert on anything. Monday Musings in the Midwest is designed to cover 4 topics: law, parenting, education, and leadership. And I enjoy sharing on all of those, not every week. But one of the things about Monday's Musings in the Midwest you have to understand is, although I'm a retired attorney, this broadcast does not create an attorney-client relationship, nor should I be considered giving you legal advice. It's for education, information, and I hope fun. Let's dive into the content today. The content is basically about 3 questions I got this week, and I love it. When you have a question, drop it in the comments on YouTube, send it to me on Facebook. I try to incorporate those as soon as I can. The first question is, somebody noticed that I kind of hesitate before I say the word M-U-R-D-E-R. Notice I just spelled it. That's because the algorithms on many of the apps that you'll see this on flag people who are talking about 2 things: M-U-R-D-E-R and sex or sex abuse, especially of children. So, if you've seen The Shining, in The Shining, they call M-U-R-D-E-R red rum. And I think I'll start doing that. You might have to go watch The Shining. It's a good show. Not one I'm watching with you. It kind of bothered me. But we'll use that term. I don't even think they like the word killing, but you won't hear me use the M word very often. Same thing with SA, sex abuse, or sex pornography is SAM. Sex abuse will be SA. I'm sorry, it's the algorithm. I'm not shy about using the terms. And I always told you I try not to let this be salty. There are some podcasts where the F-bomb and other words are flung about. I try not to do that. But great question. That's why I hesitate before I use the term, some of the terms, the M word or the SA word. And you'll hear me use other terms just because of the algorithm and the limits on some platforms that I post this podcast on. Second question, and it was a good one. They ask about probable cause hearings, and it just so happens that Tyler Robinson, the person who red-rummed Charlie Kirk, or is accused of red-rumming Charlie Kirk, all people I talk about are innocent until they're proven guilty. We know that. But Tyler Robinson stands accused of the crime of unaliving Charlie Kirk last September. They have scheduled in Utah a 5-day, which I find very unusual, a 5-day preliminary hearing. It can be called a probable cause hearing. You'll sometimes hear them called a PC hearing. Well, what does that mean? In a probable cause or preliminary hearing, the state is required, and notice it's a state, defense doesn't have to do anything. It's where the state goes in front of the judge or a neutral observer. In the U.S., it's a judge. And they present enough information to convince the judge that a crime has likely been committed, and it's likely been committed by the person who's accused. You can use a grand jury for this. In other words, a group of citizens does it, but it's very common in many states, including the state I practice in, not to use grand juries, to use a probable cause or a preliminary hearing. So Tyler Robinson he's been in jail since September, but he is now getting to his preliminary hearing, and they have a 5-day hearing in Utah. Now, here's what I will tell you about preliminary hearings. It was my practice never to pass one up. Why? As a defense attorney, now I also prosecuted, but as a defense attorney, you can find out a lot about the state's case early on by going through the preliminary hearing. In the hearing, remember, the state's required to prove probably at 25 to 30% that this person likely committed the crime. It's probable they committed the crime. And 30%, let's say. Maybe 20 to 30%, whatever, if you want to use a percentage. But that as a defense gives you the opportunity to see the witnesses, to observe what's going on, to kind of get a good feel for what the prosecution's doing. So, especially in, I would say, felony crimes, I would never pass up the chance to have a preliminary hearing. You might have attorneys who pass it up just because they feel like they have a good handle on the case. I don't ever think that's a good idea, but sometimes they do. There may be reasons not to have a preliminary hearing. It happens. So that's what a preliminary hearing is. It's the state trying to convince somebody that it's more likely than not even that stage. It's probable that this person committed this crime. And if we move on to trial, we'll present more. That's what is happening with Tyler Robinson. Third question I got, which was excellent. They were kind of asking about the Mackenzie Cirillo case. In Mackenzie Cirillo, both of the parents have gone on Andrew Cuomo's show and given interviews and basically said, it sounded like they were saying, and I'm putting words in their mouth, I'm not quoting them, but to me, as I listened to it, it was like they had all this faith that this appeal was going to set their daughter free. She was going to walk out of prison free because of appeals. Well, that's extremely rare. I think it may happen on occasion, but that is really, really, really rare. I mean, I would think less than 1/100,000th of a percent. Most appeals, I would say between 95 and 98% of the appeals aren't successful at all. Because as a court is reviewing what's going on, they're not necessarily looking at the evidence, they're looking at the procedure and process. And Court of Appeals use a standard called harmless error. The judge may have done something wrong, prosecution may have done something wrong, defense attorney may have done something wrong. But a court can look at it and say that in and of itself is not a reason to set aside this conviction. Now, I know a couple of weeks ago we talked about Alex Murdaugh. We talked about the fact Alex Murdaugh got a new trial. Again, that would be rare. And notice that Alex Murdaugh, they didn't say, oh, this was horrible, we're going to let him out of prison. No. They said, okay. The clerk of court influenced the jury enough that we're bothered by the procedure. Again, it's a procedure, whether it was fair. So we're going to let you have a new trial. Well, you go back to the new trial, people have already testified under oath. You know what they're going to say, unless there's a great deal of new evidence. And word is that there might be new evidence that gets presented. That's okay. Kind of know what's going to happen at the trial. So even a new trial is not necessarily a great thing. Well, in the Mackenzie Cirillo case, it appears to me, and it's just my opinion, that these parents have a skewed idea of what the appeal is. And a good defense attorney, all the decisions that were made as the trial went along, had Mackenzie sign off on what happened. And I think she was over the age of 18 when the trial happened, so she was an adult and she could sign off on any of the decisions that were made. So, I hope if justice wasn't served that something happens, but the best they could hope for is that she gets a new trial but the evidence has been presented once. They have an idea of what's going to be presented. Unless there's new evidence, things are going to end up the same way. And I will also tell you, in the Shirilla case, they've missed some deadlines. The appeals, I think the appeals process is pretty well over. I mean, you can keep hoping. But if something happens to a member of your family or yourself, don't go into the appeals process and think, oh, I'm going to get released from prison because somebody's going to sit down and go through this evidence and find out that that's not the way it works. They look at the procedure, they look at the process. They don't necessarily look at the evidence unless there's a procedural question. So, I mean, I wish any defendant all the luck in the world on their appeal, but you have to understand the limitations of appeal, and you have to understand how highly unlikely it is that the court's going to overturn a conviction. If they do overturn your conviction, they're probably going to remand it for a new trial. You're not going to walk out free. It can happen, but I haven't seen it happen very often. So, 3 excellent questions. I hope that helps you. I kind of wanted to talk today a little bit about leadership because I had a really good question. And I love it. I love your questions. They help me focus some things. Somebody said, what would you do if you walked into a new company? What's what you would do? Well, here's what I would tell you to do. Spend your first 2 weeks, and I would try to limit it to 2 weeks, getting to know the folks in your main office, getting to know what they do. Try as much as you can to understand how you do it. I mean, if you're talking about engineers, you may not understand all the math that they do, but try to understand how they do their job. And ask them one simple question. Is there something you do that we could make better, improve, eliminate, or streamline? Ask them that question or write it down. Get to know your employees, get to know the processes, right? But by asking that question, you're setting the stage that the employees know they can make suggestions to improve the company. And I think that's valuable. Now, you're going to spend the first week looking inside if you're at headquarters, maybe 2 weeks doing that. Second week, I would try to get out in the field. Now, I would not say some places say follow your best salesman around for a day. Nah, don't do a day. You can do it in one visit with him, probably. Don't cramp somebody's style by having the boss hanging around. Just observe and talk to them. Second thing you're going to do while you're doing all of this, obviously you're taking notes on the things they say you can streamline and process. You're starting to develop a list of perhaps 5 expectations. You don't want a list of 30. What are the expectations you want? If you're one of those people that everybody should be at work at 8 o'clock, then that's an expectation you should set. And we talked earlier then, if you've got people that are supposed to be at work at 8 and they're walking in at 8:30, you talk to that person. Don't get on everybody else, because if you're going to set those expectations, then you have to quote unquote enforce them. Have you walked into a business where they don't have annual reviews? Start talking about annual reviews. I always think it's good to have an annual review, but it needs to be an honest one. We'll talk about that later. But that's what I would say the first 2 weeks in your company do. You are learning who's there. You're learning what they do. You're learning the things they hope for. You're setting your expectations up. Then I would work with my senior staff and say, these are the things I'm looking at. These are the expectations I'm thinking about setting. Good or bad, let me know your feelings. And have a discussion with your senior staff about them. Listen to their insight. If they say, man, don't set an expectation, people are here at 8, they're all salaried. I've never believed in giving salaried people, I mean, you set a guideline, you work 8 to 5, but if you're salaried and you work till 10 o'clock the night before, why should you be there at 8 in the morning? That's me. So that's the first 2 weeks. That's what I do the first 2 weeks. If you want more, let me know. It's kind of a side note, but are you watching the FIFA World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, the Men's World Cup. If you're not, it's fascinating. The U.S. is doing well. But I have been absolutely fascinated by the cultural things that are going on by the visiting teams. For example, they said Scotland came en masse to Boston and then went to Miami, and they called them the Tartan Army. And the Tartan Army actually quadrupled, I think is the last statistic I saw, the amount of beer and alcohol that was consumed on a regular St. Patrick's Day. Norway has an excellent player called Erling Haaland. Norway's doing well. They hadn't been in the World Cup since 1994. They now have this absolute beast of a player named Erling Haaland who's doing real well. Norway actually beat Brazil, which nobody expected, but they're doing a row where they beat a germ twice and then they go row, which is R-O in Norwegian, which is taking over the sports world. And it's interesting, if you go on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, you'll see the Norwegians even on escalators doing the row, and it looks like they're rowing up and down the escalators. Very cute. Third thing was the Japanese, and they've shown some pictures of how the Japanese leave their locker room after a match, which is absolutely immaculate. So I think it's great that America hosted the World Cup. I hear we've shattered attendance records. Somewhat over 3 million people have attended the matches, which is fantastic. But I like it because we in America get to show off our country. And also on YouTube and Instagram and all those social media things, you can find clips of you Europeans saying, we were told America was dangerous, we were told we'd be mugged, we were told this and that. And what they're finding out is that Americans are very friendly. So it's been a good kind of patriotic thing to watch. So if you haven't watched the World Cup, watch it. Well, this one's a very short one. We're all coming off a holiday weekend. I hope you have a lovely 4th of July. I hope you celebrated 250 years of American independence in a safe, healthy way. And now it's kind of downhill to the school year. A lot of schools are starting in early August, mid-August. I heard of a school that's actually starting school August 7th, which seems very early to me, but oh well. I mean, it's hot. They might as well be in school. With that, if you like what you're seeing, hit the like button. Please follow. Every follow helps. And we'll continue putting out Monday Musings in the Midwest. I'm Barry Collins, and goodbye for this week.